Hello everybody and welcome to Wednesday Live Women's Health. I am Jacqueline and today I want to ask you, do you feel tired the whole time? And for most women, the answer is a big resounding yes. You feel tired whether you've had a good night's sleep or not. You feel tired whether you are busy running around or just sitting at your desk in front of your computer. You feel tired when you are eating well, and you feel tired when you are not eating well. You feel tired when you exercise, when you don't exercise. There is a general feeling of exhaustion, feeling lethargic, no energy, not being able to get up and do things, can't be bothered, that low motivation, low drive, just very damp feeling, that very damp feeling. And sometimes you get a bit of an energy boost and an energy spike, but really you wake up tired, you go to bed tired. You may even be experiencing that tired but wired feeling of feeling exhausted, but your brain is buzzing. And very often the feelings of tired but wired, low energy, lethargic, low focus, just not being able to get yourself up, and just that feeling tired the whole time, regardless of what is going on, can very much be related to your adrenal function and your adrenal glands. So today we're going to look into what are our adrenal glands, what do they do, how do they impact us, especially for women who are in perimenopause or menopause. Adrenal glands are really important, what you can do to support your adrenal glands, and really the symptoms that you may be experiencing that we've sort of talked about, and also a little bit about adrenals and thyroid because they are very intimately related. So let's start off with, what are your adrenal glands and why are they so important? So adrenal glands are these little triangle pieces that sit above the kidneys. We have, just like we have two kidneys, we have two adrenal glands that sit in that little bit above the kidneys. And their function is to produce hormones that help with regulating our metabolism, our immune system, our blood pressure, response to stress, and other important functions. That's why they are quite similar sometimes to the thyroid, and that's why some of the symptoms of adrenal dysfunction and thyroid dysfunction can look very similar, because they are both producing hormones to support key body functions like metabolism, like immune system, like stress response, regulation. All those things are, the adrenals and the thyroid do different things, but their function in the body in the way that it is expressed as symptoms is very similar. So often there is crossover between those adrenal dysfunction symptoms and the thyroid dysfunction symptoms. So we need to start thinking, what is the source of the symptoms rather than just treating the symptoms, as we know. So, as I've said, adrenal glands are about producing key hormones for metabolism, immune system, blood pressure, stress response, and other such things. What are the key hormones that the adrenal glands produce? There are two areas of the adrenal glands. We won't go too much into the biology, but there is the cortex and the medulla, and each of those areas produce different hormones. But in essence, the adrenal glands are producing three critical hormones. The first is cortisol and adrenaline and other stress response hormones, but the key ones are cortisol and adrenaline, which, as we know, through the HPA axis, which we're not going to go into, basically there is a stress trigger. Something is happening in your environment, or something is happening in your body, and your body responds with the stress response to the stress trigger by producing cortisol. And as we've talked about in other Women's Health Wednesday Live episodes, you can go back and have a look. We talked all about the stress response, what happens to the body, how the stress response feels in the body, what happens, chronic stress. Go back and check out some of my other Women's Health Wednesday Lives when we talk all about that. But effectively, cortisol is produced by the adrenal glands in response to a stress trigger. And as we talked about previously, if there is constant chronic 24-hour stress, your adrenal glands are going to be producing constant cortisol, which is not great. But that is the biological response. Adrenaline is, the adrenal glands are producing that cortisol. We know cortisol impacts immunity, reproduction, digestion, blood pressure, cardiovascular, all those things, insulin response or blood sugar response, and the insulin reactive response. So all that is going on when the cortisol is produced. The other two hormones that are produced by the adrenal glands is aldosterone, which is plays a role in blood pressure and regulating sodium and potassium, and sends messages to the kidneys about kidney function. So that's aldosterone. And the other thing that the adrenal glands do is it produces DHEA and androgenic steroids. Basically, DHEA is the precursor to testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. Okay, so effectively the adrenal glands are producing the precursors to our critical sex hormones. And if you're paying attention for my women in perimenopause and menopause, you can already start to think about what happens when my body in perimenopause and menopause is starting to reduce the production of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone through the ovaries, through the regular reproductive system, and the DHEA, which is the precursor to those hormones, needs to be there. It needs to be present. It needs to be available so that our body can maintain those baseline hormone levels of the testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. So keep that in mind. We're going to come back to our DHEA. So basically, we see that the adrenal glands are really important. They're doing some very important work in terms of the hormones they produce and the way that those hormones are doing a bunch of things in our body. Okay. What happens though when you are just not feeling good? What happens when you feel exhausted the whole time? When you can't focus and you can't motivate yourself and you are feeling overwhelmed, or you're suffering and experiencing constant high blood pressure, or some level of insulin resistance, or some level of pre-diabetes, or any other immune response, chronic immune response, developing into autoimmunity. We've talked about autoimmunity in one of the other videos. So let's talk about extreme cases, adrenal insufficiency and adrenal overactivation. There are some cases of adrenal insufficiency where the adrenal glands are not really functioning the way they need to be. If we have insufficient production, it's Addison's disease. There is also Cushing's disease, where there is low levels of adrenal hormones. We have overactivation of the adrenal glands, is Addison's disease, the overactivation, and the low activation of the adrenal glands is Cushing's disease. And that is when there is irregularity. But there is something else. And another experience that we can go through that is something that the Western medicine community doesn't really like this term, and that is adrenal fatigue. It's not adrenal insufficiency and it's not adrenal overactivation. It's adrenal fatigue. It is being used much more. The term is quite popular. There is no test for adrenal fatigue, and therefore Western medicine doctors can't tell you if you have it or not. It is very much symptom-based, but we look at our symptoms and we look at hormone production through the adrenal glands, and we look at thyroid and what is going on with that, and we look at really the whole system of what is happening, and then we can really say that there is adrenal fatigue. What is adrenal fatigue? Adrenal fatigue is when our cortisol, or our adrenal glands, have been pumping out cortisol for years, for months, long chronic cortisol production. Our adrenal glands have been overactivated and overstimulated to produce this cortisol. And as we talked about, long-term chronic cortisol production has a knock-on effect in lots of different areas, but eventually the original biological stress response of being heightened and alert and aware so you can run away from the tiger who was chasing you actually creates chronic exhaustion, chronic fatigue, chronic immune responses, and our body just begins to get exhausted. It is exhausted from that constant alert awareness, the constant cortisol production. And basically our adrenal glands have had to deal with that chronic stress trigger and they can't do it anymore. And it especially happens when something else comes along that needs the adrenal glands' attention. Very often during perimenopause and menopause, because as we said, our natural sources of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone production begin to decline. Our ovaries stop producing estrogen. The feedback loop response to the production of the critical sex hormones during perimenopause and menopause begins to slow down. Natural, normal, biological process. And as we said, the adrenal glands that are producing this DHEA, which is the precursor to those hormones, needs to up its production and needs to start producing some of those sex hormones directly itself. But if our adrenal glands are exhausted, if they have worked overproduction of cortisol for years and years, the DHEA production is just going to take secondary place. It is not going to be the as we said, the adrenal glands are meant to be producing 3 types of hormones, an equal division between these 3. Cortisol is always going to take priority. And if cortisol has been taking priority for years and years, there is no resources left for the production of the other 2 hormones, the aldosterone and the DHEA, which means that the natural biological backup plan of our body to produce DHEA through the adrenal glands and to see, to maintain that level of testosterone and estrogen and progesterone is just not there. And so not only are our estrogen levels falling, not only are our testosterone levels falling, not only are progesterone levels falling, but they don't have that backup battery anymore because that backup battery in the adrenal glands has died long ago. So basically, we now have a situation where overexertion of our adrenal glands, adrenal fatigue, high stress, chronic stress, and that stress response is having knock-on effects on other parts of our body, is having knock-on effects on other symptoms, knock-on effects on other hormone productions, knock-on effects to how we're able to navigate perimenopause and menopause. It doesn't just stay in the adrenal glands. It's not just that the adrenal glands are tired and so they begin to shut down and our body just functions like normal. There are knock-on effects because our body is an intricate, delicate system that is all working together. And this delicate system that works in that balance functions fine until one of the cogs in the wheel doesn't want to play anymore, until one of the cogs or 2 of the cogs in the wheel begins to not work as effectively and as efficiently as it used to work, such as what happens in perimenopause, and potential symptoms arise. Adrenal fatigue and the results of chronic stress don't just rear their heads during perimenopause and menopause. They can happen at any point in time in your life cycle, in your health journey, in your 20s and 30s. If you have been exposed to chronic stress, then and you are experiencing these symptoms, you need to go and get a really good adrenal panel. You need to get someone who you can talk to who really understands how these things all fit together, to know what blood work to ask for. That's when you come to me. I can sit down and go through with you and tell you what blood work to ask from your doctor to really see what's going on. But as I said, really we treat, we want to look at what's going on with the symptoms. The symptoms are enough to help direct us and guide us together with that blood work, because we want to see what's going on with the thyroid also, to see what's going on. how do we treat adrenal fatigue? How do we support our adrenals so that they can function the way they were meant to function, so that we can actually make sure that the hormones they're meant to be producing are being produced, so that we are living in that nice, balanced, well state. And to really relieve our symptoms, so we have energy, we don't feel fatigued anymore, so we have that that the ability to go and do the things we want to do without feeling tired the whole time, without having that dip at 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon when we come home and we're just exhausted and we can't do anything. So there are a couple of things. The first, obviously, is stress management, regulation of the nervous system, and really looking at your stress triggers. The adrenal glands are the stress response. So, we need to start looking at how do we reduce the stress in our lives in all different ways? How do we re-regulate and rebalance our nervous system to make sure that we are really improving the parasympathetic part of the nervous system, not just the sympathetic fight and flight response? Other things, supplements, magnesium, zinc, vitamin C, vitamin B complex, critical. Balancing our blood sugar, we know, is going to be critical for all of it because of the way that insulin and cortisol interact. And we know cortisol is always creating that sugar response in the body, that glucose release. So we've got to start paying attention to our blood sugar. Other things to include into our diet. Cinnamon is great for supporting the overall system, specifically the gut system, for balancing out the hormones, for calming down. Fiber, flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, fish oils, really increasing that fatty fish omega-3s. Those are all good ways to support the adrenal glands, all good ways to recreate balance again in our system, helping the nervous system to calm down. It's not just enough to support the adrenals. We need to take away the trigger that is triggering the adrenal glands, and also remembering that if we are feeling if we're having some blood work, if we're in perimenopause and we're noticing that our hormones are low, testosterone is that key hormone for energy, for motivation, for focus, for concentration, for desire, for get up and go. That is testosterone. So that is the hormone that we need to be paying attention to through the production of DHEA. I've been talking for a long time. I've been going on sharing so much information with you. I hope that you really have enjoyed hearing all of this and really are taking it in and hoping that you're getting to understand your body a little bit better. That really is one of the missions of these Women's Health Wednesday Lives, is to give you the information to listen to your body, to pay attention to the symptoms, to understand your body more, and then to be in touch with me, to come and consult with me, and I can help you, guide you to what blood tests you need, what's going on in your body. Let's look at the symptoms. Let's think about where the source can be. Let's think about your lifestyle, what's happening, what's going on, and we can really start to address the root cause of your symptoms so that you can improve your health and well-being, create that hormonal balance, fix those symptoms, and really feel better at every stage of life. And be in touch with me. Please send me a DM, comment below, let me know how you have enjoyed this video. Send me a DM and we can schedule a discovery call. And I look forward to seeing you next week at the next Women's Health Wednesday Live.